how the people are doing. So, you know what I really like about these two devices right here? It's that they're both absolutely phenomenal, no question about it, but they're also fundamentally so different from each other, it is fantastic, which is why I think this comparison is so bloody important. At the end of the day, you're just gonna buy one of these, probably. I think that's also why you might be even watching this video. So of course, the question arises, to pay or not to pay? Shakespearean, isn't it? Well, let's break it down, shall we? Kicking things off with the design. Here's what I think. I feel very confidently that these two look very good. They are the pinnacle of smartphone designs when it comes to these kinds of slab smartphone devices as such, but they're also fundamentally very different. It just starts off like that, right? So essentially we have the X100 Pro, which goes for, I guess, a simpler design, a simpler aesthetic, but I don't think that's quite the right term for it. Simple makes it sound like it's, it's a downside. It's really not even close. It's a beautiful design. It's very classy, and I think formal would be the right way to look at it, because this is a very formal design. And on the other hand, we have the OnePlus 12, which, let's just say it is the absolute opposite of that in a very good way. Because here we have style embodied in a smartphone. It is one of the most polarizing and stylish looking smartphones that I've ever held in my life, and that says a lot. So I think that yes, in a way, you could say that most people will at the very least be good with the design on the X100 Pro. They'll be fine with it. They'll probably like it. But on the other hand, we have this one, which you're either gonna love or you're gonna hate with the OnePlus 12. That's just the way it is. You're either gonna look at it and say that's the best thing to ever exist in the history of mankind, or you're gonna think that it came straight out the gutter. So it's gonna go like that, probably. But I think that that's a decision that should be left entirely up to the buyer. Now, in my personal opinion, I think both are perfect the way they are. They embody different ideologies when it comes to design, and it works phenomenally well. Now look, to be fair, there are no actual problems with the designs. They are as good as any smartphone can get to this very date. These two smartphones, just for reference, these two smartphones have designs that I think are fundamentally better than way more expensive flagships like the S24 Ultra, which I think is just way too simple, or even the iPhone 15 Pro Max, which I think it has a fine design, but the fingerprint resistance on both these phones, they're significantly better than both of those two much more expensive flagships combined. That's a very important distinction, and that's what I think makes the design on these two absolutely incredible. On the front, however, I think this is something that it's a minor complaint, but the bezels on the OnePlus 12 are much more uneven, especially around the top two corners as opposed to the X100 Pro. That's the only real complaint that I have. Everything else is basically the same. Palm rejection issues, even with curved displays right here, I have not had any problems. And I really like curved displays, so for me that's a win-win on both of these phones. With the displays, however, there's some things you should know. So as a whole, fundamentally, they're beautiful displays. They look stunning. There are certain things that the OnePlus does which I think actually makes it a little bit better, just a pinch. So here's the thing. The OnePlus 12 comes in with Dolby Vision for HDR. That's really the only place where they actually differentiate quite a bit. Because Dolby Vision, as you might know, is something that Netflix uses a lot, which just looks so much better as opposed to the basic HDR10 we get on the X100 Pro. Don't get me wrong, it looks good on the X100, no question about it, but Dolby Vision just hits different. That's the best way to put it without going into excessive amounts of detail that's going to take up too much time. You might be thinking, what about the brightness? Well, as I covered in the review for the OnePlus 12, the brightness may be 4500 nits on this as opposed to the 3000 on the X100 Pro, both of which are absolutely phenomenal numbers wise. That's just a lot of brightness for both of these. But the fact is this, that 4500 nits, it doesn't really feel like a lot on the OnePlus 12. If anything, when I use these phones in sunlight, when I was taking photos and videos for the camera comparisons that I've already made for these two, you can check them out, the playlists are in the description. Most of the time it just felt like they were basically on par in terms of brightness. And the whole point of maximum peak brightness is that they can be more visible in sunlight, or even when watching HDR, right? But even when watching Dolby Vision on the OnePlus 12, it looked better, sure, but I didn't see a particularly high level of difference in the brightness itself, brightness of the maximum highlights and whatnot. Really not much. So that number doesn't really translate all that much into reality. It's fantastic, as I said. You could consider both of these displays to be on par in terms of brightness, but if you're thinking that it's going to be much more on the OnePlus 12, that's really not the case. It's important that you know that. Now, there are two other things that are very closely related to the display itself. Software, which I'll get to, and then we have the fingerprint scanner, because I think that's where the OnePlus once again takes a tiny lead. It's not with the speed or the accuracy or anything of the sort. They are both great in those kinds of fundamentals, but it's the simplest thing. It's the bloody placement. The placement on the OnePlus 12 is so much more comfortable. It's right where your thumb will naturally rest when you just hold the phone. And now then, of course, the software. You see, here you might think that based off of Vivo's track record, the OnePlus might have an advantage. It has one of the best software experiences after all. But that is not true. Not in the slightest. Both of these, in my humble opinion, I think they are the absolute best when it comes to Android experiences as a whole. Now, if you know anything about me, you might know that I absolutely despise iOS. I know a lot of people love it, but I just feel like it's way too restricting. So for me, these two are the absolute best you can have in any smartphone, period. And here's the thing, they're kind of different from each other. We have the X100 Pro, which I think is smooth as butter. Now, here's the thing, I feel like the X100 Pro has very relaxed animations. It's not slow or anything, but it is definitely much more relaxed as opposed to the OnePlus 12. You see, when I'm using the OnePlus 12, unlike the X100 Pro, which has smooth but also kind of relaxed animations, the OnePlus 12, it feels like I'm blazing around. It's pretty crazy. The feeling is odd, to say the least, but in a very good way, because I really like it. I feel like it's just the way the animation speed is, or maybe the way the animations ramp up in speed sometimes. It works really well. I don't know what OnePlus has done, but it's bloody incredible. It feels really good when you're using this phone. Don't get me wrong, the X100 Pro is a pleasure to use as well, but the OnePlus's animations, they hit different, man. There's just something about it. Because I mentioned this in the review as well, the animations feel very slick. There has been no other smartphone to this date that I've ever used which has given me the feeling of being slick with the animations. It works really well, but then when we come to the customization side of things, you see, this is where both of them take kind of different approaches. So they have a plethora of customizations, whether you talk about live wallpapers, whether you talk about always on displays. Like the always on display on the OnePlus 12, it's insanity. You can make these custom patterns and they are animated to a fair extent. It looks incredible. It feels really nice when you're able to create something on your own with just your fingers, and it works so well. And the live wallpapers on the OnePlus 12, just like the animations, also feel a little bit more slick. I'm telling you, there's no real way for me to explain why I say it feels like this, but it does. It feels faster, it feels different as opposed to the X100 Pro in a very good way. Also, another thing you should know is that when it comes to the software update side of things, well, OnePlus promises 4 years versus I believe it's 3 on the X100 Pro. Now, look, at the end of the day, I think most people are probably gonna switch their smartphones to 2 to 2.5 years anyways, because things get dated pretty fast these days. Both of them will cover that much at the very least, so that's fine, I guess, but still, OnePlus does have a leg up in this as well. So, at this point, I think it's pretty safe to say the OnePlus has been giving the X100 a fair run for its money, right? Because it is more expensive, but the X100 also doesn't seem to be all that much better as opposed to the OnePlus 12. Well, that's about to change. But before we get to why that's about to change, let's talk about the performance and battery side of things. So, battery life, I think it's phenomenal on both, but it is a little bit better on the OnePlus 12, just a tiny pinch. Because of the standby. The standby time on the OnePlus 12, I don't think there's anything as good as this anymore. Even the iPhone doesn't last as long as the OnePlus 12. It's insane. And I've also heard some people complaining that the X100 Pro doesn't last all that long. That's just not been the case for me. I just don't think those rumors are true. Because the X100 lasts like 6 to 6.5 hours easily and with a fair bit of time to spare. Like it could go to 7 or maybe even more. That's how good it is. But with just how much better the standby time is, you can actually use the OnePlus 12 for 2 full days. Now with performance, things get a little bit more muddled up because we have the OnePlus 12, which is the safest possible choice that you could have here. It has a Snapdragon, the latest generation, and we have the Vivo X100, which comes in with Dimensity 9300. I'll tell you this much, Dimensity, like MediaTek, has really taken things up a notch with their flagship processors, because the experience that I've had with this, I even forget most of the time that I'm using a MediaTek processor as opposed to the latest and greatest from Snapdragon. That's how good it is, because it's basically on par. Now look, benchmarks and all that, I haven't seen them, because I don't believe in benchmarks. I don't think they give a proper idea about daily usage, especially with smartphones at the very least. So here's my thing. I test it out by using the cameras. I see how much heating happens. I see how much the phone stutter after using the cameras for a fair bit of time. And neither of these had any problems whatsoever. I also use photo editing as a very good test, because I can get some very high quality raw files from this camera right there, and both phones are able to edit that stuff with ease. There's no problems whatsoever. So my thing is this, if it can handle all that, both of these phones can handle all that, well then I don't really see any issues whatsoever. I don't really game on my smartphone, so can't really speak about that. I don't think either of these again will have any problems whatsoever. These are the absolute best processors you can buy right now after all. Especially with the X100 Pro, I haven't faced any problems. That much I can tell you right now. So for me, it's a very good thing. Now, if you're still feeling unsure, of course you still have the OnePlus 12, which does have the Snapdragon processor, but just so you know, there's no real issues with the X100 Pro, at least not on my end. And now finally, if I were the one that's deciding between these two, and I understand that I have to pay around 25k more for the X100 Pro, I think that's the price difference, 25 or 30k more for the X100 Pro, then I would do it without missing a beat. Because quite simply put, the cameras on the X100 Pro, they go so above and so beyond any other smartphone in existence that it's mind-blowing, to say the very least. The experience as a whole, it's not just, oh yeah, the photo quality and the video quality are very good on the X100 Pro. That's not what it is. It's not that simple. Because if you have seen any of my coverage about the X100 Pro, I've made both a review and a camera review. I don't do that for most phones. Very few phones get that kind of coverage from my end, because the camera app itself is so interesting and so intricate and so full of incredible, well-polished features on the X100 Pro that it deserved a camera review. That's how good it is. The OnePlus 12 is a pleasure to use with the cameras, sure, but this time, it's the X100 Pro that hits different, finally. And it's one of the most important areas where it hits different, and it takes such a massive leap ahead of the OnePlus 12 that for me, for someone who actually enjoys using the cameras and who is willing to pay more for a better camera experience, this is a no-brainer for me. That's the way it is. That's the fundamental difference between these two, and that is what could make the X100 Pro worthwhile for you. So just to go into a few details, so with the X100 Pro, when it comes to photography, especially daytime photography, you have 3 different color profiles. The textured mode for very high contrast, very stylish looks. You have these as natural colors, which is natural, as the name indicates. And then we have the vivid mode, which gives you very vivid colors. So you can have anything that you want, any kind of taste that you have. This one's pretty much got it covered. When it comes to human subjects, by far and wide, there's no way in hell that the X100 Pro can be beat by the OnePlus 2. That's just a fact right now. Because look, the portraits that come out of the X100 Pro and the sheer level of versatility and customization that you have in the style of the portrait that can come out of it, it's something else entirely. Like, check out my camera review. I really went into depth about the different portrait modes that we have. There's a lot, and there's so much you can do with it. It's honestly the most fun I've had with the camera. And then we have the OnePlus 12, which the regular portraits are fine. They are simple, basic portraits that you get. You don't get any of the style that comes out of this one. But the fact is this, the selfies are the problem with the OnePlus 12. They are pretty bad. Let's just say the contrast balance, and it doesn't really work out. Most of the time it comes out overexposed and very flat looking, and that's not something you want out of a selfie. And of a night mode, see, this is where I think the OnePlus actually is a little bit better for my personal taste, because the OnePlus goes for very dark looking shots at night it looks very nighttime-esque, like it doesn't brighten the night sky too much, it doesn't brighten up the shadows way too much. You might not like that. There's very valid to not prefer that, because the X100 Pro on the other hand, it will give you all the detail that is possible to have in any given night shot, whilst also maintaining a fair bit of contrast. And also ultra low light. If you're one of those people who likes to take really dark nighttime shots, like, you know, not outdoors nighttime, indoors, really dark, you can barely see anything with the main camera and you want to take a shot, the X100 is for you. There is no other smartphone in existence that can take as good ultra low light shots as the X100 Pro. Hell, it can even take ultra low light near flawlessly with the ultra wide camera. That's how good it is. Now speaking of the ultra wide, actually, both the main and the ultra wide camera sensors on the OnePlus 12, they're not very good, because you see, one of the dead giveaways of a sensor's quality is with the 2x sensor crop. The OnePlus 12 comes in with a 2x sensor crop, but it is by far, I think, the worst quality 2x sensor crop that I've ever seen. It's a problem with the sensor itself. The hardware is just not that good. With the X100 on the other hand, it has quite possibly one of the best sensor crops that I've ever seen. And oddly enough, when we think about sensor quality, the 3x 64 megapixel sensor that we have on the OnePlus 12, that's insanely good. For some reason, OnePlus decided to give us the best sensor in the 3x zone, which makes no sense in my opinion, but that's just the way it went. And then finally for video, see, the difference in video is not all that much. I like how the video comes out on the X100 Pro. I think it looks a little bit more overexposed, a little bit more flat on the OnePlus 12. It just doesn't quite look as professional as the X100 Pro. Now that's about the only real difference between the two. Also 8K really works well on the X100. You can basically use 8K instead of 4K on the X100. That's how good it is with 8K. So here's my takeaway. With the OnePlus 12, you get certain very specific advantages in certain areas, like the battery life, like the slick user interface, like the much better fingerprint scanner. All these things, I think they play a pretty significant role, especially if you're someone who doesn't really care all that much about cameras. Maybe you just want a smartphone that's going to last you a fair bit, that's not going to break the bank, and it's going to be a pleasure to use for daily basic activities like just social media surfing, content consumption. Content consumption, again, Dolby Vision on this thing, absolutely phenomenal. But if cameras are your priority, then at this point in time, at the time that I'm recording this video, there really isn't anything else, any other smartphone that can really topple the X100 Pro. I'm recording this 5th of March, 2 AM in the morning. Yeah, that's just the way I am. But, well, what is this? We have a smartphone that is all about the cameras, and if that's what you care for, just go with it and you're gonna have a blast. But again, if cameras are not a priority, there's really no other bang for buck smartphone like the OnePlus 12 in existence, right? So, with that said, I do hope you guys enjoyed, found this helpful, because that's the whole point, right? I'll be seeing you guys with many more to come. Cheers.